Check, 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 check. Check, check. Check, 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 check. Okay. Hey, Charlie, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. You are back home, I see.
I'm home, yes.
Excellent. How was Ottawa?
Well, it was good to be there. I moved a number of flags down the field, but now it's nice to be home, and I'll stay here for 14 days just to be
Oh,
on the
good.
safe side. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, you'll have to
Yeah.
self-isolate. That's true. I'm just waiting on the rest of them to join. Any news on the Canada summer jobs?
Oh God.
Sorry, I asked.
Oh my God. It's a mess. I'm talking to them. I was talking to the minister this morning about it, but anyways, I don't know. I think it'll change again, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get med students in all our hospitals if things work out. So
Oh, okay. Well, it's a benefit, I suppose.
that'll be bad. I said I really don't think we should be using Canada summer jobs. I think you should just make sure that med students are able to help in the pandemic. It's pretty
Yeah, I'm
obvious.
I'm pretty sure I
This is not
remember.
the program for that. So
No,
that's my fighting going back and forth. It's like we could be hiring other young people to do other things, and we could get med students to help the hospitals. So, anyways,
yeah, no, I totally agree. Plus, that's not going to help my member DNL Docs, who's like, "Oh, can I have summer students?"
I know, yeah. And then they would tell us it was closed, and then businesses were hearing that it was open, and so, anyways, we've got a big long list. We'll see.
Well, good luck to you. As much as I wish. Just touching base with Gilles and Mayor Perry to see where they're at. Oh, who have we got here? There's Mayor Perry.
You on?
You are just your camera, Mayor Perry.
Oh my God.
It's okay. Nobody's in yet, so they can't see you.
So how's that?
Perfect. Excellent.
Let this down.
Oh, there's Miss Robson. Excellent.
I have Gilles on the phone because he's not in as a he's not able to access to be in. I had to come in through the chamber. He needs to be let in as a presenter.
Oh, he's probably using a different email. That's why.
1 second. Here, you can talk to him right now. He's there.
Hi, Gilles. Can you please use your GBSO one to log in? gbso at ndp.owen.ca?
Sorry.
gbso at ndp.owen.ca?
Jill, can you hear Cameron?
I don't know. If he logs
Jill?
back.
Jill, can you hear Cameron? Jill, can you hear Cameron?
No, well, in a minute.
Okay.
Hi, Jill. You need to log in with your gbso at ndp.owen.ca email.
I did that.
Oh,
I
strange.
did that. And right now it says, please wait, the webinar will begin soon.
Well, that's okay.
COVID-19 Virtual Town Hall Part 2.
What I can actually do is that once we hit broadcast and populate the attendee list, I can promote you as a panelist. So I'll do that.
Okay, do I just hang on here? Or
You wait there and we'll pick you up out of the waiting room. You're going to get a promotion today.
Yay! I'm so excited. Okay.
All
All
right.
right, you got my number, you know to call me.
We do. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I'm just going to.
Second, let me get back into headphone mode.
All right. Are you back on my headphones?
I believe so.
Yep, I think so. Can you talk a little bit louder, Cameron?
Hello. How are you?
There you are. Thank you.
Excellent. So just a quick sound check on Charlie. I've heard is okay. Mayor Perry, do you want to
Yep.
just get a note?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So if we're all ready and comfortable, I'll hit broadcast. Perfect. then Jill should be joining us shortly.
Awesome. Is this the part where we sing and dance?
Yes.
Okay. Once we have Jill, then I'll.
Just bear with me a very short second.
All right. We're just getting our panelists lined up, so we will be right with you. See a shout out from Dawn at the Ramada. Hi, Dawn. Did we find Jill? There he is.
Somewhere
Excellent.
there, but I see it differently than normal. Oh, well.
I believe you're seeing the screen view because Cameron is sharing something on the screen. So that's why you'll see the panel on the side. There we are.
But it just doesn't work like the one this morning where it shows you all the participants.
No, we're in webinar mode, which is different
Oh,
than the
okay.
meeting mode. Yeah. All right. Are we ready to go? I think so. So welcome everyone to your Chamber's second virtual town hall with our elected officials from each level of government. I'm Keitha Robson. I'm the CAO of your chamber, and I'm going to try to act as our moderator today as we continue to shelter in place. And now, as some business begin to slowly reopen, every business in our community will continue to be subject to rapid government legislation and support mechanisms as they are implemented. When the Chamber engages with elected officials, it provides our members with the opportunity to speak to the government directly. And all of our advocacy work that we undertake on your behalf depends on the input that we receive from all of you, our business owners. No other organization better understands the impact this crisis has had on small businesses in our community who do so much to support our charities, our sports teams, our nonprofits, and indeed our tax base. In an effort to ensure that you remain informed with the most up-to-date and accurate information, we are pleased to facilitate this second in our virtual town hall series to learn how each level of government plans to continue to support you through this pandemic time. The Chamber continues to actively maintain a business information toolkit, which you can find on our website. And that's where we store our government-funded resources information. You can visit that at timmonschamber.on.ca for more information. Our Policy and Engagement Lead, Cameron Grant, is on hand to receive your questions during this virtual town hall. And I would ask that you submit your questions in the chat box you see on the side of your screen. Could be at your bottom, depending on the device that you're using. Please note that we will do our best to answer your questions as time permits, and that all questions will be recorded and shared with each respective government representative. To our friends in the media, this town hall is being recorded, and should you wish to acquire the recording, please reach out to Cameron via email. And thank you for ensuring that our community receives accurate and timely information during these unprecedented times. I would like to begin by thanking our Mayor George Pirie, MPP Gilles Bisson, and MP Charlie Angus for joining us today. And so that we respect the time, we are going to jump right into the Q&A portion of our town hall. So, Jill sounds like he's ready. Okay.
I already sent you a question.
Yeah, I see that first question. How come Keitha is doing such a good job? I don't know, Jill. It's just the
No,
way
you're
we're
doing
doing
such
it.
a... No,
Thanks,
but
Jill.
also, can I just say before we start,
Sure can.
the Chamber has been doing an excellent job of bringing people together, not just in this format, but other formats, in order to be able to talk about how our small business community is better able to deal with what's going on in this particular pandemic, and also the larger player in the mining sector. So it's very appreciated. Good work.
Well, we appreciate all of your interaction as well. I've spent more time with you all in the last 2 months than I have in the last 2 years, and it's been healthy for our business community as well, because I feel like we're getting a lot of results for them. So thank you for your participation and cooperation. One of our questions, and I'm not sure if any of you can answer this one, but about the current unemployment rate in Timmins and area in terms of percentages and numbers, and how does it compare to pre-COVID? I'm not sure if that's a number that the mayor may get from the Economic Development Corporation on a regular basis, but George, do you have any thoughts on where we might find that?
We don't have a up-to-date number on that. I know that we're very fortunate in that can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. That our largest employers have stayed in business. So we haven't seen the effects that, the kids and Lakeshores or Newmont, as well as school boards. So the two school boards, the Northern College, Royal College, and others are all still gainfully employed and paid. City of Timmins, we've had some reductions here as well within the City of Timmins. So I expect our unemployment rate will be up. But I felt fairly good about those so far. I shouldn't say felt very good. I felt that the initiatives within with the federal government, especially the number of different programs they have available, I felt fairly confident that there's money in pockets. So hence, the sooner we get out of this, the better we'll be.
Agreed. Jill, did you have a comment to add on that?
No, I think unfortunately, the ones that are really hurt in the small business sector, people in the restaurant business and various retail businesses that have been affected. And for a lot of people, that's their only job. So for those business owners and for those individuals, obviously a difficult thing. But I think the federal government did the right thing with that $2,000 a month. That's helped a lot of people to be able to sort of, work our way through this. And some of the assistance that's been provided to small business, probably not as much as what's needed, but it certainly has been a step in the right direction.
There's no doubt there will be people that have fallen through the cracks, but it's a pretty wide net that's been cast.
Yeah, we've been very busy with people needing the $2,000 a month. It's certainly cut across all manner of industries. We've dealt a lot with small business. It certainly has stabilized things. The latest, what we don't have all the details yet, is that there's been a number of layoffs at KL Gold that'll be affecting the mines, Taylor mines near Matheson and that, and maybe even KL. And so there could be a couple of hundred layoffs that coming there. So we don't know if that'll have a spin-off effect, if it's short-term, long-term. It's still, we're still trying to get all the information in, but that will have a bit of an impact. But overall, we seem to be holding.
So for the actual most current unemployment rate, I'm sure we could probably get those numbers from Service Canada. So we will try to follow up with that question a little bit later on after this broadcast. Mr. Mayor, first question is one of municipal interest. So as of today, we know that some businesses have been allowed to open slowly and safely in a limited capacity. And as enforcement efforts are under the city's responsibilities, do you have any suggestions on how best business can communicate to ensure they're abiding, how we best can communicate to business to ensure they are abiding by provincial directives?
Yeah, the directives haven't changed, Keith, as you know. The directions are still 6 feet, small gatherings. If you take a look at Yigs, for instance, they've got their nursery set up, or at least this morning they were setting up their nursery. And they should be following the very same procedures that they follow for the grocery stores, limited edition. And make no mistake about it, the individual vendors, store operators are all responsible for ensuring the safety of their workers and the safety of the clients. Enforcement's only needed. Our bylaw, of course, is out there, and they're only needed or will attend when they're called. They are doing general tours. I don't want to call them patrols. So far, very, very happy. There's been no fines levied. It's all been educational. very same with our TPS as well. It's all been educational. And it's exactly, I think when we the very first virtual town hall we had, we said where we want to get to is not any kind of enforcement, is in fact that these measures are put in place voluntarily by the vendors and the businesses, and they have been. Well, we heard this morning about one kind of lone wolf car dealership. So we'll be sending reminders out to them vis-a-vis our bylaw enforcement officers to take a look at what's going on there. And occasionally we've had a problem with one of our largest retailers in the area, but I think they've swung around as well. So that's the message is the very same. The message has not changed. It's doing exactly the same, practicing exactly the same distancing, lineups, and everything else that have been in place now for, seems like forever, but I think it's just a couple months.
Did either Gilles or Charlie have anything to add to your
Well,
thoughts around that?
Yeah, just so that people understand the process, is that the municipality in this case is responsible for the enforcement in regards if somebody's breaking those rules. But the conditions as to when you're going to open your business and how you're going to open your business is actually determined by the province. Each province has the authority to do that because under the emergency legislation that was put in place, given the province the opportunity, the ability to do this, they decide when businesses are going to close and when they're going to reopen. Both those decisions, I have to say, are guided by the public health people. The Chief Medical Officer of Health of Ontario cleared the list that was given for this morning in the way that it was. So I know that I've seen a couple of articles where there's gardening centers where the people upset that they weren't able to go into the stores and browse and look at all of the various goods that are up for sale because it's a curbside pickup. So that is a decision that was made as a result of information provided by the Chief Medical Officer of Health and is done in order to keep people safe. So we'll see more open as time goes on, but it'll be a very gradual, slow thing. And I would just say this one last thing. Notice in the province of Quebec, they were to open up their economy in some areas a little bit sooner. I read this afternoon that in fact, Quebec has pushed back a little bit to the 18th of May, some of those openings in Montreal. So even where they've been more aggressive to open earlier, there is a sort of a pushback by the public to say, hey, let's get this right. Because if you don't get it right, we're going to have more infections and we'll keep the economy shut down even longer. So it's really important from a safety perspective, but also an economic perspective, we get it right.
So I recall someone this morning referring to this as a graduation day for some local businesses, and our next question is still on this thread. As businesses are now starting to open, as we said, in a way that they have to, in a responsible and safe way. What do we think will happen with funding and support for those local businesses? Will that continue? Because, you know, some of our members have concerns that while the immediate funding was there, the funding to get them on their feet may not be there. So what are we hearing is going to be the levels of support that may continue beyond graduation day?
I think
Well,
Charlie should start.
yeah, certainly one of the issues that we've been really pushing with the government on, and our negotiations back and forth have been very fruitful, has been on the need for flexibility. Initially, we were, trying to, deal with the massive shock to the system. One of the issues, for example, in the CERB was $2,000 a month, but the initial provision was you couldn't work. Well, some people get some income, some people get an honorarium. Would they be kicked off? There would be no incentive for them to do anything. So we got that support so that they could actually start to earn some income, so self-employed and that could still maintain some contracts. The issue of repayment of the no interest loans and that have been stretched out so that people will still be able to use it. Right now, the wage subsidy will still be in place. And we're gonna monitor where we're gonna be, but I think the expectation in government is we had to be ready to be supporting this at least until October, even though some of the provisions don't extend that far, but the horizon is that we're not going to get out of this very quickly. There's going to need to be a steady buildup, but we have to have supports in place. It will probably mean us going back to Parliament to vote on more provisions if we have to extend it, but nobody is suggesting that we just hit the wall and say, okay, end of support, you're on your own. We know that it's not, the reopening and the rebuilding of the economy is not going to happen like that. It's going to require that support for some time.
Yeah, and can I just add, Keith, we part of our meeting this morning that we had with the chamber, we looked over the survey that was done by the Timmins Economic Development Corporation, and the biggest impediment for people not applying is not knowing about what's available or how to apply. So when in doubt, ask questions. Get a hold of the chamber, get a hold of the TEDC or offices, Charlie or I, and we can point you in the right direction, because there are some programs available. And what was interesting in that survey, there was a vast number of people didn't know exactly how to apply. So if in doubt, shout, as they say.
Yes, and we encourage our business community to use all the resources that they have available to them. And there's a number of business support organizations in the community willing to do that. So give us a call and we'll try and direct you to the right place for sure. All right, I see another question here about federal and provincial levels of government have tabled a number of programs to assist residents and small businesses. What steps aside from less than clear deferral of arrears on property taxes? Okay, so this sounds like it might be for Mayor Pirie. So property taxes are coming due immediately after the restrictions are lifted. I guess around the same time. So is the municipality looking at the deferral or elimination maybe of property tax bills?
I think we've been very, very clear, and that's we've deferred any interest payments on overdue property taxes. So if you don't pay your property taxes, you won't be charged interest on any balance that's outstanding. And as we've published already a couple of times, there's already a $4 million hole, both from a shortfall of revenues and increasing expenses. But I think what the city has done is very well. It's published. It's online. We've been transparent in everything that we're doing, and we're obviously in a situation of some concern ourselves.
Yes, and I know a number of businesses have contacted the city treasurer directly and got some clarity. So if there are some issues where things remain unclear for any of our business community, I'm sure the mayor would extend Natalie's phone number for everyone. We won't show her this recording.
Oh, you went on mute or something.
Yeah. Hello. Keith, come back.
I'm back. Sorry. I double clicked the wrong clicker. Okay, so we spoke briefly about this morning in our task force, Jill, and I'm just wondering, the Chamber Network has been calling on leaders to immediately execute an order to block commercial evictions for a period of the next 2 weeks. Moratorium on evictions will allow CMHC the time to implement the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, because we know there's a program there, but it's just timing, and as well as time for the CEWS money to begin flowing. So how do we help push this ask?
So as we know, on the individual side, there is a moratorium. You can't evict anybody at this point because that's been precluded by putting in a place of freeze. We don't have the same thing for commercial rents, and that's a real problem, especially in areas where the market is hot. In some downtowns, it means that the owner of the building will use this as a way to vacate the building in order to re-rent it later to somebody else for maybe more money. So it's creating a lot of problems, and we have been talking to the government about, in fact, putting in place a moratorium on evictions for commercial rents as well. So we're currently in discussions with the provincial government about that, and hopefully the government will see its way. The actual rent subsidy, I'll let Charlie speak to, because it's mostly federal dollars, but the difficulty with that program, it's the landlord that has to apply for the money and not the tenant, which makes it very complicated for nothing. So I'll let Charlie speak to that.
Yeah, that's a very good question because we pushed for this so that we would not be having businesses facing that stress coming in by the 1st of May. The government decision to have the landlords apply for it, I think, is more complicated. It also does allow for sometimes unscrupulous practices, and I'm not going to say it's happening in our region, but I know that we've heard of it in other regions, as Jill pointed out, where there is an incentive to not apply for it. And then put notice that you'll be having someone removed, even though there's a stay on eviction now with families, but businesses could be affected. So I think what we're needing to do with this is to come back to the minister and say, we have people who want to pay their rent, who want to maintain viable. If their landlord's not doing it, there's got to be a way that the tenant can do it, and so that they are protected and their rights are maintained. So this is something we're going to be bringing back to government. We've had to tweak a lot of things with these programs. This is definitely one of them that's on our list of things that need tweaking.
And this is where we have appreciated the ability to work with all of you to point out when things do need tweaking. All right, so my next question is back to the mayor, and it's one of our common discussions in deferral, so we can talk about this. But one of our members is wondering about, of course, the municipal accommodation tax, because it was a new tax that was implemented just last year, and some across the chamber network, some municipalities are being asked to postpone or cancel the collection of the tourism marketing or accommodation tax as we know it, just because our accommodation industry is one of the hardest hit during the pandemic, along with a lot of our tourism businesses. And while we know the city of Timmins has allowed the sector to defer the tax, it would be ideal from this business's perspective if they would be able to retain those funds as a grant to the business during this time, and if there's been any consideration of this. So those businesses are collecting the tax during their time of operation in a less than ideal situation. Would they be allowed to keep that directly and infuse it into their tourism business? So that's the question.
Probably unlikely. We haven't discussed this at council. We haven't discussed this internally. I thought the question initially when it was originally asked, would they even have to collect it? But if they want to collect it and put it directly into their pockets, I'm not entirely sure that would be that would be looked at favorably with the council. But we haven't discussed that.
So yes, right now the properties have been asked to continue to collect it but not remit it. They've been allowed to defer the payment to the municipality of it to date. So that's the question, I guess, they asked to council. So maybe something more concrete from our accommodations group could be presented to council just for consideration to see if that's something that we could look at as a next step to the deferral. So we will take that back as homework. All right. Charlie, we're wondering a question here about working with the Bank of Canada to encourage the use of monetary policy in complement with fiscal measures to preserve economic viability of businesses. So how are we going to, get the economy, I guess, back into the hands of business, because right now it's in the hands of government, really?
Well, I think it's going to be an understanding to get the economy fully back up will require a major social investment after the damage that we've seen that's been done by COVID. And certainly we've seen many industries are looking to government right now for help and will be asking for help. So where does that mean in terms of fiscal policy with the Bank of Canada, with what does it mean for our debt? I've actually been meeting with a number of experts on this. Kevin Page, our former parliamentary budget officer, who has the Institute for Fiscal and Social Democracy at the University of Ottawa, says the good news is with interest rates being almost flat, almost at zero, it does give the federal government enormous latitude that they didn't have in other recessions, to actually put money into the economy. So our ability to spend money is very much different than it was in the 80s and the 90s, when we were paying much higher levels of interest, and it was very crushing. We have a much lower debt to GDP ratio than many of the other G7 countries. So it's going to take, I think, a realistic investment in terms of a series of federally supported initiatives to rebuild the economy at this point. And I would say, and I'm not making promises to the mayor, but we know that the municipalities are taking a huge burden. We know that the provinces are facing a lot of financial issues. We may be looking at working on infrastructure projects where we have to change the traditional, 30-30-30 or 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 investments to get economic development happening, and to do that in a smart way. So I think that we're looking at a rebuild that's going to take us maybe 2 years to get there, and the feds are going to have to play a big part. My issue is making sure that if we're spending money, we're spending it right. The last thing I want to see is an army of members of parliament running around with white hard hats on and paper checks, cutting ribbons this, there, and everywhere. We should do smart investments. We should make sure that we come out of this in a more resilient manner, so we're never in a situation again where we were as unprepared as we were. But the Bank of Canada and low interest rates will certainly play a big part in the toolkit that has to be applied by the federal government to do smart investments to get us and get our economy moving again.
One of our guests is asking if there's been any discussion at the federal level of reducing the tax on withdrawing RRSPs as we reopen the economy, because they feel that would inject large amounts of monies into the economy.
That's an excellent question. And right when the crisis started, I had a number of people asking me that, and it was certainly something I know that the government wasn't looking at the time, because we were very much focused on the crisis mode. The government is very wary of lowering and making it easier to pull RRSPs out for a number of reasons. This may be one of the tools that they consider, especially if that money is going to be used to help businesses. So this will be part of the negotiations. Is this a tool that would help? Can we do this so that we make sure that the benefits to business, to individuals, to our society is measurable? I think it's a very worthy suggestion. It's definitely something I'll be bringing back to our finance people.
Great, good to hear. Mr. Mayor, I guess this could be a question for Mr. Mayor and Mr. MPP. So there's a question actually on our Facebook about the fire ban. So we know it's not necessarily a business issue, but is there any discussion about what the rollout of the fire ban will be? So,
Mayor, you start this hot potato. I guess I'm okay. Go ahead.
Lift the fire ban? The fire ban, I think, was put in by the province. So, Jill, this is over to you.
I knew this was going to happen.
Listen, the one thing that we're passionate about as Northerners is the outdoors. And people are looking, listen, I want to be able to sit in my backyard at home, have a little fire, enjoy the company of my family and friends that are able to get together. And people are lucky enough to be able to be in a position where things are open, to be able to get into the bush and camp and do those type of things. So listen, the reason the province did this is pretty simple, is in the middle of a pandemic, the last thing that the province wants is the possibility that there's forest fires that are started as a result of campfires that have gotten out of control. And as we know, there's a lot of those that happen. And in the middle of a pandemic, the province didn't want to be in a position to have to deal with that, because as a whole, how do you keep fire crews safe? Do we have the resources even to do it? So that's why it was put in place. I think it's been raised so many times by all of Northerners and some Central Ontario people to MPPs that it's something that we've gone back to the Minister of Natural Resources and to the Solicitor General with, and to say, is there a way that we can deal with a couple of things? First thing is, if there is a campfire, is there some conditions that we can set to allow people to do that? They haven't responded yet in a positive way, but it's something before them. The other one is being able to launch your boat this month of May, whenever the ice comes off the lake, which it's still on. Because my understanding, and I'd like to know from the mayor, because the province has shut down its access points, but apparently the municipalities have not. And I'm quite frankly a little bit confused about that. I don't know why it's been done that way. And the last part is campsites, being able to be in a position, hopefully in some not too distant future, to impose some sort of restrictions of what you can do in campsites so that people can get out to their camps, into their trailers, and enjoy the outdoors as we move into the springtime.
Yeah, I don't know what boat launches you're talking about, Jill, because I think we have one, and I think MRC has one. And last time I checked, the city was and MRC was following the regulations as stipulated by the provinces, and it was barricaded. It's not. Again, this isn't a city decision. This is a rule that the provinces put in place, and so barricades went up on the back of the provinces. I mean, the city very definitely in all this is we support the health unit, and you know, as you know, we're a child of our legislation. This WAC is
A very nice child, though, I must say.
So we're we a lot of, you know, in all of these things simply do as we're told.
Yeah, no, I realize it. I'm not trying to pass the buck on to you, George, but somebody was telling me, and I didn't get a chance to check with you, that apparently municipalities are dealt with differently. I'm not aware of that, so that's why I was just raising it.
Well, you've been in government a long time, a lot longer than I have, Jill. So.
Well, I just want to say, I really look forward to the day that the fire ban comes off. I look at our fire pit and I think how beautiful it would be, but I understand, and it's hard, but I understand the last thing the province wants is a fire at this time. So this is one of the ways that we all have to do our part. But when that fire ban comes off, I'll be a very happy person.
And so will I. I would love to have my fire pit going as well.
So there's not even an inkling of when this ban may be lifted, but we can say provincial parks aren't even opening at least until after May 31st. So is it fair to expect that we won't see a lift of that until that time, Jill?
I don't know, that we're trying to get them to use a bit of reason and common sense. Is that, you know, in your backyard in Timmins, not likely to start a forest fire, right?
Yeah.
So is there a way for people to use chimneys, you know, those self-contained units, in a way that's safe? So we're trying to get them to see if they're willing to do that. And it's not just myself, it's every Northern MPP, every Central Ontario MPP, Southwest, Southeast, except for the City of Toronto. It's an issue everywhere.
All right. Well, this week we are seeing a local PPE drive happening in our community for our frontline workers. And the next question is about that. It is about understanding that businesses are going to need to be able to access adequate PPE along with updated guidelines and education on proper use and other health and safety considerations related to combating COVID-19 so that they are able to appropriately reopen. And how is the province or the municipality looking to support businesses in that purchase and education?
Yeah, so there's two streams. The first one is there is a provincial stream by which PPEs are distributed across the province by region. We're part of the northern region, so there's a northern regional table that deals with that. It's called the Northern Supply Chain. And they've been very helpful in sourcing PPE equipment so that we can keep a couple of weeks stock at places like hospital, long-term care facilities, EMS, police, etc. The bigger challenge is, what do you do in all those workplaces that are going to need more and more PPEs as we open up? So the province has put in place a pretty efficient and fast-track process for entrepreneurs who are wanting to get into the business of producing and selling PPEs to the Ontario, the Canadian, the international market. We actually have people here in Timmins who have applied to that process, and they're actually pretty far into the approval process, where they would get into the supply chain, but also they would get some financial assistance to be able to do that. So the province is ramping up the production of PPEs here in Ontario so that we don't have to rely on Mr. Trump to say we can get our 3M masks or the Chinese or whoever it might be. So we're going in that direction, and unfortunately, I think this is me and my little hobby horse. Internationalism is good. You know, we went the way of NAFTA, free trade, World Trade Organizations, and it's a global economy. But I think this proves there's certain things that you have to do in your local economy and your provincial and national economy that are crucial to the safety of your nation and your province, and this is one of them. And that's why a lot of this stuff should actually be produced here in Canada or Ontario.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the supply chain is going to be reinvented at the end of this, Keith. In relation to local efforts in coordinating PPE, that's being done through our emergency response team with Tom Lager. I think you're speaking mostly about individual vendors. We talked about that this morning, and there's various types of masks, of course, that will be available, whether they're a cloth mask, where it's a surgical mask, or whether it's any variant of KN95 or a N95 masks, which are really the top end of the line. Our local large employers have been incredibly generous in donating thousands and thousands of these masks, and I think we're in relatively good shape. I think when it comes to open the various levels of retail, you'll see in our town right now, there's lots of individuals walking around with homemade masks, cloth masks and such. And some of them, I mean, even are decorated with football logos, you know. So you know, people are being very creative.
Like a certain chamber president, he might have one of those.
Something about the Patriots.
People are very, very creative with their styles. And again, I must say, even local families that were teaching sewing are extending that service, so they're making masks. There's been an incredible sense of volunteerism and entrepreneurship when it comes to these masks. I think people are having a lot of fun with it. I don't expect that at a local level there'll be any shortage of masks at all. And I love the way the community responded to this challenge.
I wanted to add in terms of the big picture and where we go from here, because we've seen an incredible outpouring of support. But we should never, ever be a situation again where we have to crowdsource for the medical supplies that we need to keep us safe. I think that's the lesson that we've learned. The fact that, you know, we trusted the global supply chain, and we had emergency equipment seized by the American president in a political stunt while we were still honoring our international obligations and sending supplies to the United States as well as nurses. We don't want to ever be in that situation again. And we see the capacity in Canada to step up. Certainly, you know, Compass and KID is a great example. There was a need. Our people stood up. We're talking to manufacturers in Western Ontario who've been hit hard over the last number of years, who are stepping up, stepping into the breach. It's going to require a major national conversation at the end of the day. It's a conversation that's going on in Australia right now, where they've decided, being an island continent, they never ever want to be caught again without the kind of supplies that would keep them safe. That is going to be a reasonable conversation in the coming years, and it will also build a stronger and more diversified economy. These are things that we need to learn lessons coming out of COVID, and we have to bring them in terms of policy to make sure that our society, our health system, our economy is sustainable, because we don't know if COVID's going to come back for round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. We don't know what's coming, but what we know is where we were not prepared, and we don't want to be in that situation again. So the supplies that will be needed by business will be enormous, and they should have them, and they should be made by Canadians.
And the sad part, in the last SARS outbreak, there was actually a lot of work that was done in that way in order to stockpile masks, surgical gowns, different stuff that we need. And unfortunately, a time expired, because you only can keep that stuff for so long until you have to replace it. And governments of different stripe, and this is not pointing the finger at one particular government, they decided not to renew the stocks, and that's part of the reason. Let's hope that this time we actually learn the lesson.
Well, and there will be a new cost to doing business because of the PPE requirements for many industries that did not, prior to the pandemic, have the requirement for those things to be in place. So, you know, we need to help them, maybe with some funding in order to learn these skills themselves, I think is the question as well. Like, how do they learn? Where do they get it? They don't even know. So I mean, we'll figure it out, but we'll have to work together to support them in doing it. All right, so the next question is about, well, of course, the framework. So Gilles, you're up. So we are eager to understand the timeline of the plan, but recognizes timing will be dependent on coordination with public health officials, other levels of government, and the business community. What action are you undertaking to see the framework put in place? So, you know, maybe you can share what you can about how the provincial government will be operating and what things need to happen in order for there to be more of the framework implemented.
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, the provincial government isn't wrong when they say, listen, we don't want to just open on arbitrary dates. This has to be driven by science, by data, by experience, to make sure that we get it right. Because the cost is, not only will lives be lost if we open too early and, you know, the spread gets worse, it's going to keep the economy closed down even that much longer. So we need to make sure that we ramp up in a, you know, in a methodical way, that we don't end up making things worse by opening them up. So that's the first thing. I've been doing a lot of work along with MPPs across all of Ontario. I'm not the only one, where we're being contacted by our business community. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by the car dealerships. You couldn't test drive a car, you couldn't walk into a showroom, but you can go into the grocery store and get a pound of meat. So not that the car dealerships wanted, you know, unlimited access, but they wanted something in place that allow their customers to be able to do what they have to do in a safe way. So what a lot of us have been doing as members is dealing with both the ministers responsible and the regulatory body. And in the case of the car dealerships, we got them to give a partial opening that happened this morning. And we've been working on that for a couple of weeks so that you're able to open in a limited way in your showroom by appointment only, that there's test drives that are able to be done with certain measures to make sure that cars are sanitized once somebody's taken it out for a test drive. And the same thing in other sectors. I've been doing a lot of work because we're Northerners. Everybody wants to go camping. Who owns a camper who doesn't want to go in the bush by the May Run weekend? If you can find one in Timmins, I would be surprised if there was anybody who didn't want to do that. So we've been working at trying to find a way with the government. Is there a way we can do this safely? Is there a way that we can do a partial opening in some of these? And so far, the government is a little bit reluctant to go there. I think what you said a little while ago, Keith, is right. If they're not opening up provincial parks until at least May 31st, that's probably where they're going to land. But that's where we spend all of our time as local members. The other thing I just want to say, the Northern members have been meeting as a group, and most of them, of course, New Democrats, have been meeting as a group and trying to strategize how we can work together on all of these things, boat launches, et cetera, how you're able to shop safely in different parts of the retail sector. So things are being done. We saw some small steps taken today, and I'm sure others are down there or coming down the road.
So just to be clear, the current state of emergency for the province is until May the 12th, which,
yeah,
you know,
May
will be
12th,
reevaluated.
Well, it's not reevaluated. We're actually returning to the House on May the 12th. I'm just actually in negotiations with the government as the House leader on that. And we're going to pass a motion in order to give the government yet again the ability to maintain these emergency powers for the time being. And you can only do it for 30 days at a time. That's the way the legislation is done. And, you know, as long as we're cautious, we're going to get there. But let's not run into, you know, into problems by opening up things too early.
All right. Anyone have anything to add? Hearing none.
I would add that, in fact,